Daddies, we are bringing you the top 5 happenings of Spa. Belgium. Oh, has it been a long break? Too long. Forget these double headers, honestly. Just give me a race every second week. That'll do me. I don't like these long breaks.
Get withdrawal symptoms from no F1.
Pretty much.
Joel spends all of his time jumping on Facebook harassing those that don't get their facts straight, which is a good approach.
Yes, you keyboard warriors, be warned. I am active. So we're coming out of the summer holiday. Summer for Europeans and Americans and anybody north of the hemisphere. Winter for us.
Cheers, Joel.
Cheers, big ears.
I'm in need of
caffeine
ingestion.
So here's a local plug for Daniel Ricciardo. If you haven't been back in Perth for a while, I know you hang out with those Monegasque people. Vic Park, just down from Park Centre, there's a little coffee shop called Imp. Very nice.
They've been making excellent coffee. They've been making excellent coffee.
The Parabolica in Vic Park.
Lovely segue into Monza next week. A little bit early, but we're not far off.
So first of all, just keep in mind the fact that we are kind of starting to call out of things that aren't specifically race day. As we progress further and further into the season, a lot more happenings are starting to occur during practice sessions and qualifying sessions that drastically affect what actually happens on race day. So at number 5, Ferrari's race pace. I don't think anybody can doubt, and I've been calling it all season, the Ferrari engines this year, they have some serious herbs, and nobody's catching them in terms of definitely down the straight. Now, it's not just the engine, it's the whole package, and with F1 it's always been about the entire package, which is why a team like Red Bull, with arguably the slowest engine on the grid at the moment with the Renault, they're still competitive because their chassis kicks some major amounts of butt through chicanes. So what is it that Ferrari's doing now in combination with that engine? It's rake. Now, don't want to go into too much details because it would take like at least 10-15 minutes to literally go through Bernoulli effect, all the things that go into actually creating natural downforce in a car via rake. But let's just suffice to say that what's really happening is underneath the car, they're creating a low pressure system which is basically sucking
negative downforce. So creating a low pressure system which creates downforce.
So they don't need a big rear wing or other aero things on top of the car to push the car down to create downforce. They're now creating natural downforce, as opposed to, for example, the Silver Arrows. They don't have a rake car, therefore they're using aero to create downforce. The bonus of that, though, from Mercedes' perspective, is because they don't have as much drag on their car, the car cuts through the air a lot easier.
So you've talked a little bit about the advancements of MGU-K, MGU-H, any of the 6 engine components. It's almost without doubt that there is some degree of power upgrade that Ferrari have got, which is perhaps head and shoulders above other teams. All other teams have got engine power improvements coming through with the Gen 3 Mercedes upgrade that happened this weekend.
That's right.
But Ferrari's was at least as good as that, if not better.
So where they're deriving this additional power is coming from the MGU-H. Now, what's really interesting is they're not breaking any rules. There's nothing illegal with what Ferrari is doing. If you were to look at the FIA rules with regards to what the teams are allowed to do with their power units, and understand that for every internal combustion engine, they're allowed to have an MGU-H, which is heat transfer, which is usually tied to heat extraction from straight off the turbo, as opposed to MGU-K, kinetic, which is tied to the crankshaft, which then basically recycles energy from braking. The FIA rules state that there is a limited amount of power that recovered from the MGU-K is allowed to pass into the energy battery reserves. Okay, so therefore the amount of energy that can be applied directly to the power drive is limited by how much is in the battery. So now what that means is that if what Ferrari is doing is they're taking energy from heat extraction, which is basically being spooled off the exhaust of the turbo. There is no restriction on the amount of energy that they're allowed to transfer from between the MGU-H to the MGU-K and or the battery. Now, the only restriction that applies to them now is that they can only apply that power via the MGU-K once the car is traveling 100 kilometers per hour or faster. But if there is essentially unlimited amounts of energy coming out of the MGU-H into the MGU-K, it does mean that they can deliver power evenly, constantly. And with regards to a whistling sound that the Ferraris are making coming out of the corners, does kind of imply what can that really be? It's definitely not something combusting. If it's something whistling, it's basically either got to be turbine spin, the whine of an electric motor. What else could it possibly be? I just would like to bring attention to talking about top speed versus even power band. They have this immediate torque coming out of corners, and that's why I think the evidence is pointing to them being able to take further advantage of the MGU-K as an additional power unit for longer periods of time, giving them acceleration power, not top end power, but acceleration power.
And then there's talk that you touched on before about fuel. There's talk about the different smell in the fuel that's coming out.
Not everybody is using the same petrol in their car. Mercedes using Petronas, Ferrari using Shell biofuel.
And then you've got the Red Bulls using Mobil. Yeah, look, they're all running different fuel packages and different mixes. There's all these elements that have gone into potentially the extra speed gains that we've definitely seen categorically in this race.
Yeah.
And to be see Verstappen and Hamilton getting out of the car, checking over the aero on the way out. You know, I think that's only part of the overall jigsaw puzzle that needs to be solved.
Absolutely. So, enough about Ferrari. Point number 4, Force India. And again, we're going back to the qualies to call this out. The result of the qualifying is that Force India, both Ocon and Perez, congratulations boys. Before I say anything else, I am so happy that Daddy Stroll bought Force India, and they're now called Point Force India.
Point Race Force India. Point Racing Force India.
Racing Point Force. Very glad that Daddy Stroll bought Force India. Now, what that means is, of course, saved a whole bunch of people's jobs, saved Force India being able to race for the rest of the season. However, due to some muck up with racing licenses or whatever it is that goes on.
He just didn't purchase the racing license. They didn't have time to process it. So good video to watch is the Autosport channel. It clearly articulates this very, very well. But they bought all the assets, all the IP, all of the staff, everything across, proved to the FIA that they actually had a functioning team that's financially backed. They just didn't have time in the interest of the season for Spa to purchase the license, and therefore they lost all the rights to the actual points. There's a whole series of issues around whether they should have had an engine reset and all the rest of it, but that's another discussion.
But result of the quali, getting back to it, what ended up happening is both Force India cars made it into Q3. At the very, very beginning of the start of Q3, the rain fell. The race gods shined on them, and the selection of time, tyre choice, all those things came together for Ocon and Sergio Perez to basically pick up a very, very good qualifying time compared to the rest of the field. 3-4 Ocon Perez. Congratulations to Sergio, congratulations to Esteban in basically making row number 2. So that leads us into point number 3. Jason.
I would say the timing of Hamilton's pit stop. Now, we've talked about before incorrect strategies put in place by Mercedes and getting a few things wrong. Here we've seen an instance where they've done all right in the last few races, but could they have conceivably brought him out 1 or 2 laps later, put him in front of Verstappen? Did Verstappen create any issue with regards to track placings when he came back out after his pit stop? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, let's just keep in mind the fact that Max didn't even bother to try and fight for his position.
Yeah.
He knew he couldn't fend off Lewis's power on the straight. It didn't block him in any way, shape or form. I don't think that it legitimately held up Lewis to that much of a degree. However, The decision was made to pit early with the thinking that if they could force Vettel to pit earlier as well, I think the strategy behind that was Vettel would then have, less chance to last on those tyres, and hopefully might give Lewis a chance to fight for first place towards the end of the race. Number 2, Bottas, P4 finish. Now, first of all, let's call out the fact that Jason and I have been saying all year long he's not been having the best of luck. This particular race in Spa, he actually did quite well though, considering the fact that he had to start right from the back of track. Ran into a little bit of damage right in the first corner, but managed to recover under the safety car and basically fought forward. Never managed to overtake Max. Actually, he never even came close to challenging Max for P3, did he?
No, well, he didn't, but you didn't sort of cover on the reasons why he was pushed back. So he had a number of allocations already fully utilised. And the events of Saturday have now played a very large bearing on the events of Sunday and possibly those race outcomes. But he didn't have to qualify, and he chose to disrupt the qualifying order. So he did spice his way through the field, Bottas that is, and really couldn't have achieved anything better than P4, you'd have to say. P3 would have been a stretch given that he was so far back. But he did have a minor incident there on the first corner, basically misjudged their braking zone and went into the back of Sorokin. Thankfully, neither of them sustained too much damage, but Bottas did have to come in to the pits the very next lap thereafter.
Some mentionables. First of all, first mentionable that I want to call out is all season long, people have been complaining about the halo, how they dislike the halo. Purpose of the halo is to protect the driver. Now, that did that in dramatic fashion. Just very, very quickly point out the fact that a flying Fernando Alonso went straight into Charles Leclerc, and without the halo, it could very well have been a fatal incident for a very, very young, up-and-coming driver.
And look, this is the pretense on the halo that needs to be cautioned against. It's not for us to make a judgment call on whether this would have been life-threatening or not.
No,
the whole point of these things are to prevent any of these things from happening regardless. In the absence of a halo, would something detrimental have occurred? The whole point of it is to introduce it so it removes as much of that risk as possible. That's exactly what it is.
Oh, hometown hero, Daniel Ricciardo. Unfortunately, due to said incident, Daniel Ricciardo lost his rear wing in the very, very first turn. He basically came into the pit. It took Red Bull engineers quite a bit of time to replace his wing.
And front wing.
And by the time he came out, he was already down 2 laps. 2 laps. Yeah, he was already down 2 laps.
To get it all squared away,
So, of course, it meant that Red Bull decided to race him anyway, in the hope that eventually the potential for another safety car might have come around, which would have given Daniel the opportunity to then lap the field and make up that pace, giving him the ability to then come back into race point contention. However, that never happened, which then ultimately decided them to retire the car. In retiring the car early, they're preserving engine life, brake life, all the stuff like that. Kimi Räikkönen.
Yeah.
I feel seriously sad for Kimi. If Kimi had not picked up that damage or the puncture from the front wing of Daniel Ricciardo coming into his rear tyre, despite the fact that Kimi had a very, very poor qualifying, not due to his own fault, that was due to some petrol issue, not enough fuel in the car and so on and so forth. However, despite that bad start, it was very likely to be a P1, P2 Ferrari in the front with Lewis picking up P3 for Spa. Never happened, of course, because Kimi had to retire the race. Quick call out to Haas and your mate Grosjean.
My good mate
your
Grosjean.
best friend Grosjean.
The only sad travesty in the double finish with Haas, and before I get on the negatives, I'll focus on the positives, which is typically the other way around, is that I'm glad that they've actually both managed to finish the points. I genuinely am, because I don't like to see accidents occur regardless, because it's just a bit of a shame.
Spa 2012.
Well, I think, Joel, no one can actually accurately assess how good a race driver is if someone's involved in an accident and someone gets taken out, as we've just touched on 2 drivers already, right?
Yes.
That being said, they both finished, right? And Grosjean P7, Magnussen P8, great finish for Haas. About time that a double points haul in reasonable fashion. But unfortunately, the negative of that is Grosjean's performed so poorly for most of this season. He's been so patchy that if he does actually pull it together, he may avoid losing his seat. Right? So, he's actually currently sitting in 14th. But I think if you want an accurate assessment of how good the team should really be, you really need to be looking at Magnussen losing
Yes.
8th in the overall
Absolutely.
standings.
Absolutely.
So therein lies your yardstick.
Gasly and the Honda engine. And the negativity, it's continuing negativity towards Honda, which I just really, really don't understand.
Is there though? Have you been hearing that
Yes.
negativity?
Yes. The amount of
from
people.
Facebook members or from the real
Well, obviously.
F1 community?
Hey. We are the real F1 community. Come on.
You and I don't bad Honda at all. We
No.
love Honda. But I think anyone out there seriously needs to be thinking about how McLaren started the season very strongly and have just continually, consistently gone down. Toro Rosso in the Honda engine started slowly. Everyone was sort of saying, great move to McLaren for not actually sticking with Honda. And what's happened is the opposite effect.
Oh, absolutely.
So they've gone from strength to strength.
That's right.
And I actually think there may just be this chance that if you just go back to history and history tells you something, that Honda always pulls it together, that Red Bull just may, in fact, be making the right decision.
Yeah. And I would call attention to, there was a slight head-to-head scenario that was happening between Hartley and Ericsson
Oh, yeah.
in the Sauber.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that the Honda was holding its own against the Ferrari engines. Yeah. So that speaks volumes in my mind.
One last quick mention, if I may. A double finish for Williams, the underrated performing team of the year. And I'm just so very, very glad that Sorokin, less Stroll, because Stroll's always going to have a seat anyway, but Sorokin and Williams in general have actually managed to finish here in P12 and P13. Fantastic, gallant effort by those guys. At certain stages of the races, they were really taking it to the Saubers.
Yes, they were.
And the wooden spoon this week goes to McLaren, I'm afraid. So
Stoffel.
Yeah.
I feel for you, brother.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yes.
Number one happening of the day.
Yes. What is it, Joel?
Nico
Break it
Hulkenberg
down.
in the first turn.
Brain snap?
I don't think so. Is it a brain snap? Something either went wrong or he misjudged it ever so slightly. He just didn't brake in time. What happened? Runs into the back of Alonso. Alonso goes airborne right over the top of Charles Leclerc, takes out Charles Leclerc, takes out Daniel Ricciardo's rear wing, which also takes out Kimi Raikkonen's tyre. Domino effect.
On some key people in the championship standings that would have actually placed a lot better than their qualifying
That's right.
positions this weekend.
So straight up DNF, Hulkenberg, Alonso, Charles Leclerc.
Yeah.
Follow up, Daniel Ricciardo,
Yeah.
retirement, and DNF, retirement by Kimi
All
Raikkonen.
solid drivers.
Now, before we leave you, Daddy's driver of the day.
So I think you can't go past the Force India team this week. Ocon qualified strongly. Perez got him on the first corner, kept it all the way through. You've got to hand it to the guys. They deserve it, but Perez out of the two deserved it most.
Yeah, the fact that they were allowed to race, the fact that they had all the stress in the build-up pre-race, and they still managed to pull it together and have an awesome race.
So we're only a few days out from Monza.
That's right.
From Italia.
That's right. We'll see you all in Monza.
Va bene. Arrivederci.